What's up guys, ATCZ here, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck of the Day. Today we're going to do a pure Zoo deck profile because I know that a lot of people don't really want to mix the deck with stuff. They want to play it as much as possible like it used to be. Well, it's not as it used to be, but still if you play a pure Zoo deck, you can enjoy the fact that you have a small engine that can win the game with a lot of generic stuff that you can adapt the meta. And this is the advantage of this deck. It's not as resilient as the Tri-Brigade Zoo is to disruption because it doesn't have a lot of extenders. But the good thing is that you have so much free space in the deck that you can include pretty much anything you need to combat the certain meta that you're playing against. So you can adapt to your locals or anything pretty much else. So this is the good thing about this deck. If you want to see a deck that is more easy to play against disruption, then you need to watch the Tri-Brigade Zoo deck profile. And if you want a deck that can beat more stuff without having to rely on a side deck, then this is the profile for you. So before we begin, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming videos. And now let's get to the deck profile. So to start off, we have the Zoodiac monsters. We play one Ratpier. Ratpier is better in this version than the Tri-Brigade version because I am playing the Zoodiac combo. In the other version, I don't really play Zoodiac combo because you do have more stuff to do damage with. You have the Tri-Brigade Link monsters, and the Link 4 is a really good card. But in this build, you rely on the Zoodiac Xyz monsters and Zeus in order to win you the game. So the moment you run out of Xyz monsters, then this is pretty much over, so you need to play Zoodiac combo in order to get them back to your extra deck. And this is why normal summoning Rat in this version is a little bit better than the other one, because in the other version, you would just send a Ram or a Whiptail depending on what you need, so that would be pretty much it. Next up, we have 3 Whiptail. I still believe Whiptail is by far the best normal monster, actually the main deck monster in the deck, because it helps you deal with pretty much anything. And now that Dragoon is a thing, this card is even better than before, because this deck has an inherent auto Dragoon that does not target, does not destroy. Even if you don't overpower it with a lot of Whiptails, just one is enough to pretty much destroy it. So if you bait something with maybe like Zeus, so if you summon it with 2 materials and then you can drop a barrage because you don't want to use all your materials. This is the problem with Zeus. If you use all of its materials to pretty much do something, but your opponent has something that negates and destroys on the field, then you will lose Zeus, because even if you manage to send their entire board to the grave with Zeus, if they have activated an effect that negates and destroys, even by chaining on it, yes, you will get the effect, but first effect still gets negated and destroyed, so Zeus will be destroyed. And if you've actually used all of the Zoodiac Xyz monsters for Zeus, because by doing that, it gives you 6 Xyz materials, so that basically means that you don't have anything else for the entire turn. Your opponent might come back and OTK you, unless you have a lot of hand traps in your hand. So this is why you need to be a little bit more conservative, and Whiptail helps you do that, because if you use like a couple materials for Zeus, and then you like drop a barrage or a monster reborn to bring back an Xyz monster, and then you summon Dryden, this is basically what you need to be able to have some disruption after you clear your opponent's board, because just clearing your opponent's board is not enough in the current meta, because the good decks do have a lot of follow-ups, so they will be able to come back and win the game. Next up, we have 3 Thorblade, cycles your cards, even better than the previous build. Same thing with Ratpier, because you do have more cards to send. Aside from the other 9 Zoodiac monsters you play in the deck, you have 2 more copies of Zoodiac combo you can discard to get a draw, because you never really want to discard barrage with it, so I don't really count it as a discard out or discard. So this is why this card is much better, and it gives you piercing as well, which can help a lot sometimes. And 3 copies of Ram. I do not play Bunny Blast or Katarus, because not their effects that under materials are bad. They're decent by negating targeting from spells and targeting from monsters, but their field effects are not very relevant. Ram has an effect that helps your Zoodiac Xyz monsters mainly from impermanence, or if you're playing against a trap deck, so you can save yourself like from a Lost Wind or a Crackdown or a Compulse. But it also has a good field effect that, especially now with Dryden, is much better, because you can pop it on your own, bring back a monster from your grave, so you can use its effect again. And this is where Chakanine helps, because you bring back your Ram, and then Chakanine you can bring her back with Ram by detaching her, and then Chakanine can use her effect multiple times because she's a soft once per turn. And this is how you get to Mega Clubs, by getting 3 Xyz monsters on the field by using just 1 Ratpier or a Thorblade combo with a Ram. And now let's go to the hand traps. You do play a lot of them in the deck, because this is what the deck is good at. It helps you combat your opponent's hand with a lot of hand traps, and then it has a very simple-minded playstyle that just summon an Xyz monster and then bring more out, and then you can do your combos. So we have 3 copies of Nibiru. I think if you want to combat meta decks, then you need to main deck Nibiru, because decks like Infernoble and Dragon Link cannot be stopped by normal hand traps. You need to have at least 2 in order to stop their combo, because 1 effect Veiler is most likely not going to hurt them. But Nibiru is the one hand trap that if you time it right, then you can just pretty much destroy their entire combo. There are ways to use Nibiru wrong, so if you use it too early, if you use it too late, and your opponent manages to bring out a Herald. So you basically, what you need to do with Nibiru is wait for Linkross and then drop it, because if you do not drop it on Linkross and wait for the Metal Marcher, then there's a chance that they will use the Phalanx or the Genba with the 2 tokens to make a Herald, and they don't even go to Metal Marcher at all, so then your Nibiru will be dead, because if they do that and they have enough extenders, they can do the full combo. So you don't need to be too patient with Nibiru, but you need to drop it after Linkross, because this is why you need to throw it in the choke point, because if you drop it before, then they will most likely continue with their combo. 3 copies of Ash Blossom, very generic. If you're playing against weaker decks, then these hand traps are really good on their own. But if you're playing against high combo, then you need to see multiples. 3 effect Veiler, because of Anaconda mainly. I still really like Veiler in the main deck, because if you're playing against Rogue, you're most likely going to face Dragoon, because Dragoon is the king of Rogue right now. It does not see play play in any of the meta decks, it just makes the worst decks a little bit better. 3 copies of Gamma with a 1 driver. This is another hand trap that under certain scenarios can have the same effect as Nibiru against the combo deck. If you hit like something like a Romulus or Isolde's second effect, then maybe if you are lucky and your opponent doesn't have a lot of extenders, then you can win with just 1 hand trap. And for the spells, you have 1 copy of Barrage. Unfortunately, for Dryden to come back, this card had to go to 1, which is why I think this version is more vulnerable to disruption, because it's more reliant on its normal summon. If your opponent used something like a Heavenly Spheres, Charles, or Tyranno on your normal summon, then unless you have this, or maybe a Monster Reborn, then basically your turn is over. This is why you need to make sure your opponent doesn't end on something like this, and this is why you play a lot of hand traps in the deck. Because if they do end on just one of these interruptions, they don't need to have a full Dragon Link board. If they just have a Heavenly Spheres, then most likely you cannot play around it because you're playing this version. In the Tri-Brigades, you have stuff like Ferizit, which helps you special summon another Zoo from your hand, so you can play around the fact that your normal summon got disrupted. But in this build, you have to make sure your opponent doesn't end on a good board. 3 copies of Tenki, which adds a total to 14 starters, which still is plenty. You most likely will see 1 card to go for your plays. Even if you just see 1 Thoroblade without anything to discard for Thoroblade, that's good enough, because it means you can summon Zeus, and Zeus is just an insane beast that most likely destroy your opponent's entire board, and you will have disruption for next turn, unless your opponent has something that can negate and destroy Zeus. I do play 2 Pot of Desires, which is another good thing about this version. In the Tri-Brigade Zoo, I am running Nerval, which is the one that you have to discard with Fractal in order to search, which is why I think you cannot run, or you can afford to run something like Pot of Desires in that version, because you have one-offs that help you facilitate whole engines. In this deck, yes, you do have one-offs, but if you banish Barrage, if you banish your Rat Peer, it doesn't really matter. You don't need them to win. So I think Desires in this deck is really good. And I also play 2 copies of Pot of Avarice because I don't think it's enough to rely on Zoodiac combo. Combo doesn't only return only Zoo cards, so it cannot recycle Zeus, but Pot of Avarice gives you 2 draws instead of 1. So I think you need to play in this deck very consistent, because you will eventually get to your Avarice, and even if you draw it turn 1, it's very easy to get 5 monsters in the grave, so it's not like a dead card early like it is for other decks, because they cannot actually use it turn 1. I am maining some back removal in the deck, so I'm playing 1 Harpy's Feather Duster and 2 copies of Cosmic Cyclone. I wanted to have coverage for a lot of matchups, and Cosmic Cyclone is not bad against some of the tier 1 decks. Some Dino decks do play Lost Worlds, so you can hit that even if you're going first. And against Dragon Link, if they have something like a Boot Sector Launch or Legacy Guard Dragon, sometimes their hands are reliant on these cards in order to extend to do the combos. So just a well-timed Cosmic Cyclone can be very disruptive. If you're planning on purely going second, then you can replace these 3 with Lightning Storm if you have them, or you can also play Alpha in the deck if you want to go second, because Alpha is a really good card. It's just that I didn't want to play anything that would be completely dead going first. Yes, Harpy's Feather Duster is, but Harpy's Feather Duster is the total blowout, so I think it's worth running it, even if it means having a dead card when you're going first. And the last spell is 1 Monster Reborn, because I wanted to play something that is like Barrage, not really, because if your opponent uses UCT on your normal summon, then this is dead, unless you summon like a Rat Peer on a Thoroblade, so we're able to discard something. But if your opponent Charles your normal summon, then you can bring it back. It's like the old days where we used Shuffle Reborn because we were afraid of Ghost Ogre when we summon Rat Peer or Thoroblade. It's basically the same thing. You need more extenders, especially with Barrage being at 1. And for the traps, play 2 Zoodiac combo. Really good card in this version, because you rely a lot on your Zoodiac Xyz monsters, and you can discard this with your Thoroblade or send it with your Rat. And 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence, because I need to play a lot of hand traps in order to combat the meta, and this adds up to 15 hand traps. You can replace some hand traps with anything you want. If you know that you're playing against decks that get hit a lot by Droll, then you can main deck Droll, or if you're playing against stuff like Orcust or Salamangreat, then you can main the cards like Diddy Crow. It very much depends on what you're going to face. These are the most generic ones to cover pretty much anything. And for the extra deck, we have 2 copies of Zoodiac Borbo. Borbo has ended up being possibly the best Zoodiac monster, even better than Dryden and Chakanine, because it can facilitate Zeus on its own. Just normal summon a Zoo, throw a lot of Zoodiac on top of it, you summon Borbo last, you attack directly, main phase 2 you summon your Zeus, and basically can use its effect 3 times, because use a normal summon, you have 5 different Zoodiac names in your extra deck, so you can have Zeus with 6 materials. So unless your opponent has 3 monster negates on the field, then they will probably get their board wiped. This is why Borbo is such a good card. 2 copies of Hammer Kong. There is the good old play with Chakanine where you bring back Hammer Kong and then you summon Tiger Mortar to put a material under it, so you can have something to protect Dryden from targeting, because if you have Hammer Kong with a material, then your opponent can only target it, so Dryden cannot be targeted. But with stuff like Droplet or Dark Ruler No More, this play is not really that much relevant, because there are stuff that play around this protection, so it's not the best card. But I still wanted to play 2 copies of each of the Zoodiac Xyz monsters, except for Dryden, of course, which is at 1, but just to have the different names so I can summon more, use more materials every single time, and I can cycle them back with Pot of Avarice and combo. 2 Tiger Mortar, put back your Zoo monsters from the grave as material. 2 Chakanine, this brings back most likely your Ram, and then you pop it with your Dryden to get another monster from the grave. And if you bring back Chakanine, you can summon then Tiger Mortar, then put a material under Chakanine and use her effect again, because like I said before, she's not a hard once per turn. 1 Dryden, because Dryden is the good old disruption of the deck. Unless you end on Zeus, which sometimes you will, because your opponent will not be able to deal with it, then you need to summon Dryden, because the Zeus sends every other card on the field to the grave, unfortunately, so it's not that you can have it Dryden on the field. But if your opponent deals with it, then you need to make sure that you have at least 2 Xyz monsters you can go from your extra deck, so you can use Chakanine and Dryden to have some kind of disruption. So if you can clear your opponent's board with 2 Zeus activations, you can use a normal summon, Hammer Kong, Tiger Mortar, and Borbo, and then summon Zeus on top, so you have 4 materials, and then you have Chakanine and Dryden for the main phase 2. So even after your opponent deals with Zeus with something like a negate and destroy like Dragoon, then you can have something to deal with your opponent's turn afterwards. And for the link monsters, I play 1 Ausa. Earth Charmer is basically the best one in this deck because everything is Earth, so you can summon whenever you want. Your opponent has something like an Earth monster in the grave, you can take it. 1 Phoenix and 1 Unicorn. These nightmares are basically what you need. Cerberus is not really that relevant right now. And 1 Megaclops because it's very easy to summon it. Just 1 Ratpier. You can summon Megaclops because, like I said, Chakanite is not a hard once per turn effect. And Megaclops, if your opponent doesn't have an out to it, and this is basically against dinosaurs. Dinosaurs do not have an out to it. They do have Xyz monsters, but unless you do something stupid and activate a Megaclops effect when they have a Dolka on the field, then you will not be able to get killed unless your opponent is something like a something that deals with Megaclops in the main deck, like a Droplet or Dark Ruler. So yep, that's the deck, guys. It's a really fun deck. It's very different from the Tri-Brigade version. It does have a better game state when it deals with your opponent's board because it does have a lot more disruption, a lot more utility. But unless you go into that state, then it's basically a dead deck because against cards like Buster Log or something that disrupts your normal summon, then it's very vulnerable. So you have to choose which of the 2 versions you want to play if you're interested in playing Zoodiac and pretty much adapt to the meta that you're in. And this is the good advantage that Zoodiac always had and always will have. So yep, that's it, guys. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and we'll see you next time.